Let me quickly say a few words on what I understand by the terms digital inclusion, the inverse, and social exclusion. So digital inclusion, the use of technology either directly or indirectly to improve the lives of and life chances of people in the places where they live. Social exclusion is a shorthand term for what can happen when people have a combination of linked problems such as unemployment, discrimination, poor skills, low incomes, housing issues, high crime and family breakdown. But also we'd like to highlight, of course, that as we've positioned that not all socially excluded are digitally excluded, of course. So the statement clearly isn't universally true, but I'll point to the evidence later, I think, that shows that there's sufficient correlation for policymakers to have some interest in this area. But let's just consider why it actually matters. Well, social exclusion obviously comes at a massive personal, social and economic cost. On the grounds of social justice, as well as sound economic management, we need to address those problems. So digital exclusion is a symptom of wider exclusion, but also sometimes a cause. Digital technologies can help to reduce social exclusion, but also have a much wider contribution to society and the economy. Develops in digital technology, as I'm sure we'll hear throughout the evening, have over the last decade generated a period of extraordinary social and cultural change. Digital technologies have impacted on almost every aspect of modern society, and they can improve how we work, how we're entertained, how we communicate with each other, the healthcare available to us, and how information and knowledge can be brought together and used for our benefit. But the benefits, of course, are not enjoyed by all. While the majority of people in the UK are active participants in the digital revolution, the benefits are not, distributed to all groups and all communities. Inequality in the use of and application of digital technologies is a new driver of social exclusion in the 21st century, which risks accelerating some of the social divides and creating new ones. The government recently said that despite its significance, not enough people, individuals, communities, organisations and decision makers at all levels are aware of the benefits of digital technologies. Over the past decade, UK citizens and businesses have been enthusiastic adopters of technology. From the early days of the Blair government, there was an appreciation of its potential, and technology was willingly harnessed to the modernising agenda. But after a promising start, gradually the scale of the challenge, the waning of the political appetite and the power of the bureaucratic machine slowed things down, I think. Nonetheless, even if tangible outcomes and bankable political successes were increasingly hard to come by, the endeavour spawned its own mixed economy with central government, third sector organisations, quangos, local authorities, businesses and academia beavering away in this area, many addressing education and digital inclusion. One such achievement obviously was the 6,000 UK online centres. And then over the intervening years, organisations such as UK Online, the Alliance for Digital Inclusion, ADI, Ofcom, Oxford Internet Institute have contributed significantly to a practical and theoretical understanding of digital inclusion. And if you just look at some of those findings, they're interesting. In the UK, an estimated 17 million people over the age of 15 are not using computers and the internet. Analysis of those who are missing out shows a strong correlation with those experiencing social disadvantage. Research has also seen 15% of the population, that's more than 6 million adults, is socially and digitally excluded. So research conducted by the European Union provides insight into the economic benefits of achieving inclusion, and a report by the European Commission estimates that if the current EU policy targets in digital inclusion were met, economic growth in Europe could be boosted by around €85 billion over the next 5 years. Social Exclusion Unit, formerly today's Social Exclusion Task Force, produced a thoughtful, if little known, report, Inclusion Through Innovation, on the links between technology and social exclusion. One of its recommendations led to the formation of the Digital Inclusion Team, which has in turn provided much of the analytical underpinning for of the government's recent Digital Inclusion Action Plan. It's probably fair to say, however, that the UK now has a solid analytical base and a thorough grasp of the issues as any European company but we're still some way from concerted action. So in fact, if we look at the way government IT has progressed over the last decade, we can see that there's been tension between business of government and the business of government IT. Around the world, governments have looked at IT as one of the main weapons in improving service delivery. The scale of the challenge clearly is considerable. I think it's right and healthy to have robust discussions as to the way government uses IT as an instrument of its broader policy goals. But regardless of whether it's wholly accurate to caricature the present government's approach as centralising and top-down, it's certainly quite legitimate for George Osborne and his advisers to question whether a more decentralised approach is preferable, especially so if it's closely aligned with emerging thinking around Cameron's post-bureaucratic age. So the government's big focus on the role that IT plays in service delivery has inadvertently at times crowded out digital inclusion initiatives, I think, or indeed orphaned them. There's a feeling that until now the digital inclusion agenda has been seen by too many in Whitehall as largely peripheral. So somewhat exceptionally, to break down some of the siloed mentality all too common within Whitehall, the Social Exclusion Unit looked at the issue of social exclusion and digital inclusion. The resulting report, as I mentioned before, Inclusion Through Innovation, showed the way forward, moved digital inclusion policy from the purview of the technologists and integrate it into mainstream policy making. And of course, last month, Lord Carter produced his interim report, Digital Britain. But let me say that, welcome the fact that government acknowledges information and communication technologies are integral to our future prosperity, stability and security. As regards this evening's discussions, I applaud the plans for broadband universal service obligation by 2012, the statements about return path on digital television, and the serious commitment to next generation access, all of which are extremely important. In the past, some might have found it surprising that a BowGroup event such as this is discussing social inclusion, but I think it's a reflection of changed times and consistent with the focus that David Cameron has put on social issues. And the aim to be as radical in social reform as Margaret Thatcher was in economic reform is an interesting ideal. And in this vein, I found David Cameron's recent views of progressive conservatism particularly interesting. First, a society that's fair, where we help people out of poverty and help them stay out of it. Second, a society where opportunity is equal. Third, a society that's greener. And fourth, a safer society. As Cameron pointed out, these aims are not a million miles away from New Labour aims. So this then changes the terms of the debate to be largely about the means to achieve these broadly shared aims. And of course the ability to deliver on the means, which is basically execution. So in the context of what we're discussing this evening, the means are digital inclusion. Or as regards the broader public service delivery goal, the means are how we harness IT in a so-called post-bureaucratic age. And as we discussed earlier, it's perfectly legitimate and indeed healthy to argue about the mechanisms of how ICT can be used to deliver on such key public policy issues. What's less productive, although admittedly politically extremely tempting, is to point score on individual project failures and question whether IT should be playing a prominent role. The debate, I believe, has moved on. The focus is how IT can be used to shape and deliver the key policy goals, but not IT as conventionally understood. That raises a host of questions as to whether existing government or a future Conservative administration has the will, understanding and capacity to realise the potential of Web 2.0 and emerging technologies, and how new business models and social innovations can be powered by mass collaboration. These questions go beyond the scope of tonight's discussion. It seems to me that they need to be more tightly woven into a broader narrative that David Willits, Oliver Letwin and Jesse Norman and others have begun. So let me conclude with a few closing comments. Let's take at face value David Cameron's intention to be as radical in social reform as Margaret Thatcher was in economic reform. Let's also acknowledge, as Oliver Letwin has said, that it's not enough to treat the symptoms of social problems, you've got to tackle the causes. I'd argue that both propositions invite a serious look at social exclusion. I think there's a demonstrable link between digital exclusion and social exclusion. UK policymakers have a reasonable understanding of the problem, but I think there's still much to do. If there's one area that cries out for social innovation, it's social exclusion. I'll end with a suggestion to Adam and his colleagues in the Shadow Cabinet that a serious and committed focus on digital inclusion could be a good litmus test of new conservatism, connected, compassionate, collaborative conservatism. So thank you.